maybe one person in the back there. All right. You got to represent. Okay, you're carrying the weight for everybody. All right. And so how about one more very important question I forgot to ask. Make some noise if you're on vacation today. Who's on vacation? Everybody but me. Okay. And so we're going to learn about this beautiful city, its history, its architecture. And we're going to learn about the architects themselves too, what inspired them, their artistic styles, their engineering feats, and more. And we're going to start with this beautiful white clock tower called the Wrigley Building. Wrigley as in Wrigley Field and Wrigley Gum, same guy. Wrigley was built in two sections in 1921 and 1924 because there used to be a train line running through the middle of it there. Now, the face of that clock up there is 2 stories tall, and its minute hand is a bit longer than the wooden benches that you're sitting on right now. For perspective, it's really big. And so the tower itself was inspired by a Spanish cathedral called La Giralda, which is in Seville, Spain. In the beginning of Chicago's history, the architects here didn't really have their own styles just yet. They were copying European styles because that's what was popular at the time. So they call this the Spanish Revival style of architecture. It's also got some little French detailing up there on the side and on the rooftop as well. The Wrigley is covered in 250,000 glazed terracotta tiles, which are all very delicate and need to be carefully hand washed every now and then, but they are also fireproof because that's kind of a thing here in Chicago. And they see our American flag because tomorrow is Independence Day, so we're all celebrating. Who's here to celebrate Independence Day? All right. And so the next building coming up ahead of us is our second tallest in the city, the Trump International Hotel and Tower, designed by Adrian Smith and built in 2009. This style is called contextualism because it matches and flatters its context, its neighbors, often with mirrored glass windows. You can see it reflecting all of its neighbors beautifully, and the sun as well. Its first terrace is 16 floors, which is actually the same height intentionally as the rooftop of the Wrigley Building that we've just seen, matching its neighbor. The second terrace is the same height as the thin white tower across the river. And its third terrace is the same height as its next door neighbor, which we're just starting to see come around the bend, that black box building that is the AMA Medical Center. The AMA Plaza. That one was designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. We'll talk about him further on. You can see some of Trump Tower's lower floors are wavy like the waves of the river, more contextualism put in by Adrian Smith. Adrian Smith, who designed this, is from Chicago and is also very well known because he also designed the current tallest building in the world, which is the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, which looks similar to this, but it's almost twice as tall. Now, up to your left, you will see the Jewelers Building with a dome on a tower. You can see it's got corner temples. You might recognize one of those corner temples from a scene in Batman Begins, where he's standing up there looking down at the city below. Cue dramatic music. The Jewelers Building originally was designed with a car elevator so that the jewelers could drive straight in and get lifted up to the front door and not have to walk through the dark, scary parking lot where the mafia might be lurking in the 20s when this was built. Back up to our right are everybody's favorite giant twin corncob towers, Marina City. Marina City was designed by Bertrand Goldberg in the 60s. His idea was to bring people to come live downtown because back in his day, nobody lived in downtown Chicago. There was nothing here, just work. So Goldberg had this idea to create a self-sustaining complex, which had its own laundromat, grocery stores, retail shops, bowling alleys, cinema, restaurants, and more. They've even got their very own marina downstairs where residents can safely keep their boats year-round. And you can see they have 18 floors of parking spaces, which are valet only. You can see how they park the cars too, up against the edge, right there, on most of those floors. You can see that some of the cars are occasionally parked hanging a little bit over the river too. Now you might be looking at the way they park those cars and you might be thinking to yourself, well, has anybody ever just gone all the way into the river from up there? The answer is yes, they have, because this is America. Twice. Yeah, twice. Once for a movie called The Hunter with Steve McQueen, and the other time was for a car insurance commercial. Must have been quite the policy on that one. If you look over to your left, you can see the boat traffic cones hanging from the bridge. You'll probably see those again on the way back. Now up to your left, you will see a Greek temple on top of a modern glass tower. This is 77 West Wacker, a nice example of the neoclassical style. Neoclassical is a fusion of the new and the old together in perfect harmony. You can see the modern glass windows, which are framed by Portuguese royal white granite. It makes it look almost as if you're just seeing through the building to the other side. It's a gorgeous effect. 77 was designed by a Spanish architect named Ricardo Bofill from Barcelona. You have to say it just right because it's Spain, Barcelona. And this one was built in 1992. It's definitely one of my favorites. Back to the right is a red brick building, which is got 6 bays of windows east of that clock tower, but only 5 bays of windows west of that clock tower. That is because the Reed Murdoch Center had to destroy one section of windows in 1926 to make space for the expansion of LaSalle Street in 1927, because the city was growing rapidly in the 20s and they needed that space. I'm sure these architects were not too happy about that change, but they did patch it up nicely. Nowadays they have inside of here restaurants and offices. They've got the headquarters of Encyclopedia Britannica inside there. Does anybody over 30 remember Encyclopedia Britannica? Oh yeah, it was a good set of books, wasn't it? My dad still has ours in the basement, I think. It's all online now. Continuing up on the right is a tall, shiny glass tower called 300 North LaSalle. Looks like they're getting their windows done today. My favorite feature of this building is that lovely little steakhouse they have downstairs called Chicago Cut. I just went there in May, to celebrate my 5th season here at Shoreline Sightseeing. Gotta celebrate number 5 with a steak. You can see next to it is an older building. The Helene Curtis has a 3-part design and large windows. This is called First Chicago School of Architecture style, because this is when the architects here started gradually moving away from the European styles and began creating their own unique styles, kind of coming of age over 100 years ago. Continuing up on the right is this big, wide merchandise mart built in the Art Deco style. Art Deco always has deep inset windows, vertical racing stripes, polished Indiana limestone, and repetitive geometric shapes. Merchandise Mart also has these 8 Pez dispensers, or busts in the front, that are of the merchant princes of Chicago. These were the wealthy businessmen years ago that helped the city grow by investing in it. Installed by the Kennedy family, who owned this building for 50 years. Merchandise Mart occupies 2 city blocks. It has 7.5 miles or 10 kilometers of hallways inside. It's full of offices, showroom floors, boutiques, restaurants. It's got a hair salon. I saw that last time I walked in. I was a little bit surprised. Now, we are entering Wolf Point, which is the Y-shaped confluence of the 3 branches of the Chicago River. This is where it all started years ago with a settlement of fur trappers. The first thing they built here were 3 taverns, because priorities, right? Yeah, that settlement eventually grew to become the town of Chicago in the 1830s, and it has not stopped growing since then. Straight ahead of us is another tall glass tower with parabolic arches on the top and the bottom. This one that looks like a large hot pocket. Yeah, that is River Point. River Point was designed with the arch on the bottom because that section is built over train tracks, and you cannot block the trains with your building, so they had to go around it. But it looks nice that way, doesn't it? Doesn't matter who you are, you cannot block the trains. These guys are Heinz, in fact. Investments, not the ketchup. A Houston-based corporation. Underneath the lovely arch, a few years ago, they put this beautiful red spiral sculpture that is called Constellation by Santiago Calatrava, another famous Spanish architect, known for his spiral designs and his lofty ambitions. Underneath this tower, you will see a little walkway, a little river walk with some ivies and some happy little trees and some round holes. Those holes were specifically designed to ventilate the trains, which are now all underground as of 2017, when they finished this tower and the plaza that surrounds it. We are now slowly turning onto the north branch of the Chicago River. The north branch flows diagonally through the whole city, and it forks a few miles up north, and then it fizzles out many, many miles north in the suburbs, which we're not going that far. We're just going to go about a block, and then we'll take a pause, we'll turn the boat around, and we will continue seeing more, because there's a lot more to come. To your left, you'll see River Bend condos, the white building curving inward. They used to boast a great view from both sides. Now, not quite so much. So you might own your condo, but you don't own your view. These are things that happen sometimes in a big city. To your left, behind there, you'll see some construction. They're making a new residential building to keep up with all the demand to live downtown now. This little old pink building is the Fulton House. Fulton House was built in 1898, so that makes it the oldest building that we will see today on the tour. When this was built, it didn't have any windows. Its walls were pretty thick because this was a giant meat freezer. Chicago was the hog butcher to the world, so they had to store it somewhere. But now people live here, so they had to melt all that ice to get from point A to point B. It took 3 months to wait for the ice to melt before they could redesign it. And the man in charge of its redesign was sailor and architect Harry Weiss. Harry Weiss, being a sailor, he loved nautical themes, and he loved the triangular silhouette of his favorite sailboat. So a few years later, Harry Weiss designed the 4 triangular-shaped river cottages right next door. When he built these in the late 80s, a lot of people said he was crazy. They said, who's going to pay all that money to live right by the river? This isn't even the nice part, they said, but joke's on them. It is now one of those sold for over $2 million less than a decade ago. Now, everybody wants to live by the river. You'll see the Kinsey Park townhomes coming up to your left. They all sold out before they were even finished in 2000. In contrast, to the right, you will see the East Bank Club. They have their back facing the river. That was the more common posture towards this river. Years ago, before Chicago cleaned it up and made it beautiful and fun, like it is today. 12 of them, and they are 12 feet, about 4 meters in diameter. It has 12 of these columns called caissons, and they're made of steel and concrete. They extend all the way to the top and to the bottom, and then down to the bedrock to hold it in place. And then, as we pass by it, you can also see large steel beams extending upward and outward like the branches of a tree to cradle all of that weight efficiently. This creates a fun feature. Everybody look up to your right. You'll see the reflection of our boat going by. You might have to block the sun though. You can see, you might even be able to find yourself if you wave and say hi me. It's a fun little view right there. Fun little feature that they, don't know if they did that on purpose or not, but it's pretty cool. 150 North Riverside Plaza also has 12 giant tanks of thousands of gallons of water up near the top called inertial slosh dampers. And what they do is whenever this tall tower starts swaying gently in the breeze, which is normal for a tall tower, the water in those tanks will slosh back and forth in the opposite direction, and that movement will actually help to bring the building back to its center from above. Signature style. You'll notice that all these architects, they are artists. They all have their own unique, recognizable styles. Now look up and down the side of the Bank of America building. You can see it's got big ridges. They look like waves crashing sideways. These ridges help to catch and break up wind currents to help reduce sway. And this unique shape allows each floor to have 14 corner offices because everybody that works here is very important, allegedly. Continuing up on the left, you will see a large throne-shaped Art Deco building. It's got offices in the towers where the windows are, but the star of the show is the theater, the opera, which is behind the big flat space in the middle. Now look carefully in the center of the flat space. You will see the comedy and tragedy faces of classical theater. Below the faces, you can read the name of the building. Let's all read it together. It says Civic Opera Building. They didn't have spell check back then. Now they knew what they were doing. They were going for the classical look. So they thought ancient Rome, which spoke Latin, which uses V's instead of U's. So that was their way of looking more classical. Now the Civic Opera Building opened its doors in the fall of 1929. Who remembers their history books? The fall of 1929? The stock market crash and the beginning of the Great Depression. And after that was World War II. And after that was recovering from World War II. He always said, less is more. Mies van der Rohe lived through 2 world wars and a depression, so he was a very practical man, and so was his style. Very practical, just glass and steel, no decorations. All that stuff on the bottom is new. This all meant, though, fewer materials, so it was cheaper and faster to produce, and that's just what everybody needed after that long architectural drought. So this style became very popular for years, until people started getting tired of less is more. His rivals started saying less is a bore. They said, let's do something different and new and exciting. How about we make the next one white? So they decorated Gateway Center 3 in white stone and concrete. Baby steps for the slow, gradual evolution of styles with Beth. They call this the international style of modernism because this style became popular all around the whole world in the 70s. It got so popular that now you see buildings that look like this everywhere, so it looks a little bit generic. Now right next to it, you see a little short building with X's on the outside, X's holding up its rooftop on the outside so that they could exchange commodities inside, which was the original purpose of this building. Now the purpose of this building is to be a bakery right next door to a gym. Wonder which one they'll choose. Building, and they shot a cable across with a grappling hook that attached, and they used it to zip line over Van Buren Street right here so that they could rob the Bank of Gotham next door. If you watch that scene very carefully, you can catch a little glimpse of the Chicago River right here, and of me giving a tour. Right? No, not that last part. I get a little carried away. But you do see lots of little bits of Chicago throughout those Batman movies and in many others as well. So this big Art Deco is actually our old main post office. When this was built, this was the largest post office in the world because Chicago was the mail order catalog capital of the world with all the big name retailers here like Sears and Montgomery Wards. This post office is so big that it actually has a 6-lane highway going right through it, like nothing. It served Chicago well for many decades, but eventually they had to shut it down because of delays and other things. And then the old classic building sat there, abandoned, lights out. But they knew that the people were angry, so they gave them what they wanted. They just made up someone to blame. They made up a scapegoat. Except in this case, it was more of a cow. That's right. They created a vast cowspiracy that still persists to this day. Seems those journalists had some sort of beef with Mrs. Catherine O'Leary and her bovine friend. Yeah. All right, let's continue. So, after that fire, Chicago was left with a third of the city completely destroyed, and this was a huge tragedy for many people, but it was an opportunity for one group of people, the architects. From their perspective, this was a blank canvas in the middle of a major city, so many architects moved to Chicago to help rebuild after the fire. Men like Louis Sullivan, who eventually taught Frank Lloyd Wright. Men like Daniel Burnham, who was also a city planner, which was convenient because the city needed replanning. Burnham's plan of 1909 redesigned the city in a way that made it easier to navigate it. Now this building with the white outline that looks like an old 80s video game with short and long balconies in the middle. This is 235 Van Buren. This is contextualism again, but its context is very different. Now contextualism is meant to match what's around you, not look like any other building necessarily. It's by a highway, it's by a 6-lane highway, so the short and long balconies are meant to represent cars and trucks that go by it every day. Perkins and Will actually won an award for that very unique design. Now, this tall pink building coming up, it's got a hexagonal base and an octagonal main shaft that is 311 South Wacker, and it is covered in pink Texas granite that makes it bigger. That's right. This one lights up at night. You see it's got barrels on top that light up like a beautiful crown of LED lights that can be seen for miles, and they do that for attention because they are right next to the tallest building in all of Chicago. The super tall black tower with 2 white antennas is the Willis Tower. Also, all bundled together at the base for stability because it's all about that base. That's what the kids are saying these days. All right. You can see each one of those smaller towers tops out on a different floor, 50th, 66th, and 90th, and only you can see from here, but you can go to their 103rd floor sky deck. The sky deck is an observation deck, it's a museum, it's a tour, it's a lot of fun. The sky deck is so high up that you can see 4 states from up there. You can see Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, and Hawaii from up there. No, not Hawaii. I'm just making sure you're paying attention. The 4th state is Illinois. It counts. The state counts. It counts. You can see it. All right. Now, speaking of maps, I told you I'd show you the curve in the river. Look up to your right. You see a red block representing this building on that slight curve in the river that we passed by earlier. You are here. Now, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. Now, on the lower floors, make it very ergonomic and really looks a lot nicer than it used to. Now, when these towers were being built, when the building was under construction, the engineers designed the towers to be angled slightly outward a few millimeters because they knew that when they brought in the heavy centerpiece, it would pull them down and make them perfectly vertical. It's really amazing what these engineers can do. Every big tall building's got an architect, but it's also got an engineer. Now up to your left, you're gonna see another Art Deco. This one is 2 Riverside Plaza. It was built in the 20s. Just after they had discovered King Tut's tomb in Egypt. So there's a big Egyptomania fad going on. Even the architects loved it. Look at this one. Look how they put Egyptian hieroglyphs in those facades that are smaller towers that extend outward like the arms of the Great Sphinx. They put Egyptian obelisks all along the front of it as well. It's just definitely got that Egyptian vibe, which mixed well with Art Deco. They kind of formed side by side in many cases as they brought that style back. Now, continuing up on the left, you will see what look like a set of giant hangars on top of the Boeing building here. Those structures are all interconnected and they are all holding up one little corner of the building right here, which is built over the train tracks. But we already know you cannot block the trains with your building. So this one corner is just hanging over nothing. And its weight is cantilevered from above and be distributed over to the other side, just a little bit over. Now, the original owners of this were the Morton Salt Company, and there's no concrete on it. And that's because concrete is heavy. And our Chicago-style bridges are all designed to open and close like seesaws from either side. They're all perfectly balanced with a big, heavy 12,000-ton counterweight that is 3 times the weight of the leaf of the bridge. And they're so perfectly balanced that they only take about a minute to open or close. They are very efficient. It usually takes longer to clear people off them to the back to the road. And now, why do we need to open our bridges? Well, because the sailboats have to get by, and they have tall masts that can't get through otherwise. Another movie, Ferris Bueller's Day Off. That's where his dad's office was. Bueller. Anybody seen that movie? Bueller. It's a good movie, yeah. And that's, especially after a hard rain, we still struggle with that nowadays. But it's come a long way. Now, the city decided in the 70s to have some scientists come in and study the river. That top piece had to be brought in on a barge, floated up to here, and then helicopter lifted up to the top, and they attached it, and that was the exact sound that it made. Right next to it is the London House, its glass annex, which was added to the London Guarantee Building, the Beaux-Arts building on the end. They redesigned it into a lovely hotel in 2016. London House also has a really nice restaurant on their top floor with an amazing view from up there. It's the one that curves inward on Michigan Avenue. Now, and so you can see there's a lot of stuff going on always on Tower, as in the Chicago Tribune newspaper that used to have their headquarters there. The newspaper decided in the 20s that they wanted to have a contest and a prize to see who could design them the most beautiful modern office building in the world. 2 architects, Howells and Hood from New York, won the contest with their French Gothic revival style. Tribune Tower has pieces of world monuments built into its outer walls at street level. It's very interesting to walk around it and see what you can find. It's across the plaza from the Apple Store, this big glass building with a conspicuously iPad-shaped roof, which bet they have to upgrade that roof every time a new iPhone comes out.